And it appears we are live streaming now. If you would like to begin the meeting, Your Worship.
I thought those of clerical interest would want me to do it on time as opposed to a couple minutes early.
Oh, I suppose, yes. Do you want to wait 3 minutes?
Yeah, that would be appreciated by me. I know I have a lot of constituents that will be following this meeting, and I don't think they're set up until 2 o'clock.
I was just going to comment then. I'm sure I'm free to do it. I looked at the Midland Boy, the tide reporting, as they call it, and I noticed it yesterday. It got up to 1.775 meters, I think it was. I had that note somewhere, but now it's under my computer, but just shy of where it got on November 1st of last year. So yeah, the water was a real factor for everybody in Georgian Bay.
Well, it's curious because 6 Mile Lake has dropped a foot in the last week, and we're down to our winter low right now, which is about 2.5 feet down. So there you go.
That's why the bay's so high.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had extreme winds, and that of course creates the surge. And according to my measuring stick down at my dock, yesterday we were up 3 feet 2 inches.
Wow.
But of course, it all went back down this morning as the winds died.
All right, folks, I'm going to get this meeting going within 1 minute, so be prepared. I've never heard the council so silent. I'm almost hesitant to start things. Don't worry, Jessica. Anybody watching will understand that remark.
Peter, are you going to be starting with your Indigenous part? I think that would be
Yes.
great. Thank you.
All right, it's 2 o'clock, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. We want to acknowledge that we are on the lands traditionally occupied by Indigenous peoples. They continue to care for this land. They continue to shape the township of Georgian Bay today, and we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today in guiding our decisions and actions. Megwitch. And as I added with last week, I think we have to acknowledge as part of that our history, both in regards to Indigenous folks and everyone else, about past pandemics and the health challenges that we've all faced. And while many people are referring to this pandemic now as unprecedented, in reality, there have been numerous ones in the world before. And I think a lot of lessons can be learned. The Spanish flu, even though it didn't originate in Spain, that's what they call it. The Spanish flu is a good example of that. And with that, let's get the meeting going. And my first motion, and what I'm going to do as I did last week, is I'm going to read the arbitrary mover and seconder, and if either of you object to being on the motion, then please object immediately. But I have moved by Councillor Jarvis, seconded by Councillor Wienko. Be it resolved that Council adopts the special agenda of April 14th, 2020 as circulated. All those in favor, please wave your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's unanimous, and that's carried. Thank you. Our next topic on the agenda is regards to boat launch, and to the best of my knowledge, we'll be getting a verbal report on this.
Hi, Your Worship. I was not planning on providing any sort of verbal report for the reasons that some, if not all of council, I'm sure, have had communications with residents over the weekend, late into the evenings. And we did draft a motion that I think Councillors Bocek and Douglas have arbitrarily moved and seconded, and stating that to support the province's recommendation that everyone stays home, that we will close the boat launches as of tomorrow. So I recommend that you read the motion as it is and then open it up to councillors for comment and vote.
I'd already decided that after you started, But okay, the motion as it currently reads, and been moved by Councillor Bocheck, seconded by Councillor Douglas. Whereas the province of Ontario declared a state of emergency on March 17th, 2020, amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the Township of Georgian Bay made a declaration of emergency on March 27th, 2020, amid the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the province of Ontario deemed marinas as non-essential service on April 3rd, 2020. And whereas the province of Ontario ordered the closure of all communal or shared, public or private, outdoor recreational amenities everywhere in Ontario on March 30th, 2020. Now therefore be it resolved that council hereby closes the municipal-owned boat launches for public access, and that the municipality-owned boat launches will remain closed until the province has ended the order which deems marinas as non-essential services, and that the unbudgeted cost to a maximum of $7,000 be approved for the concrete barriers. That's the motion as it currently reads. Who would like to initiate discussion? Councillor Cooper.
So the only thing I'd like to say about this is that I think we're having a discussion about something in isolation, which really relates to 4B, which is accessed for seasonal residents. And I think it's sort of, as I said, a discussion in isolation as opposed to the broader topic, which is access. And so I would like to see us have a discussion that includes the boat launch, but all access matters. And I'd be happy to make a move something if we need to do that. It's really just a point of, in terms of dealing with the order of this and not doing a onesie, as it were. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to comment? Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Wienko.
In light of Councillor Cooper's comments, I think there's a bit of an issue here because we do have control over the boat ramps, but in general, we don't have control over the decision by the province to limit access as it stands by basically closing the marinas down. So I think, while I understand where Councillor Cooper is coming from on this, I think we should be looking at a comprehensive discussion. Ultimately, I know that we only have control over one of these two items on the agenda, ultimately, or that's a perspective on it. And maybe that's why we want to deal with them separately.
Councillor Wienko.
Thank you very much. I was concerned about the idea of our launches being used this past weekend. I just wanted to make for the people who are listening in that I did tour a number of the launches this past weekend in the wards I represent, which are the inland wards. And I basically visited the 5 top boat launches in these, the inland wards. And I was surprised to find that basically in Port 7, there was no cars and no boats. Up on 6 Mile Lake, there's 2 landings. Both of them a total of 5 cars, the total of the 5 cars and one boat trailer. And they were using it to launch a dinghy from it. And then I went up to Go Home Lake, and there was 10 cars and 1 trailer, and that trailer was basically used for a tin boat. So basically this past weekend, there was no real indication that people had brought boats up and were using our launches for any particular reason. So I was quite happy to find that out. But having said that, I'm sure as we move closer to the end of the month and to May 2-4 weekend, they'll get more activity. So I like to go ahead and support this resolution and close down these facilities for the foreseeable future.
Councillor Bocheck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commenting on the closing of the launch ramps, as Paul did, I went around to the launch ramps in our area and found it's very similar. The Honey Harbor launch ramp near Staun's was quite busy. in and out. There's no parking there. So of course, I think there was 4 cars and one with a boat trailer, but the launching and the in and out was pretty consistent all day long. I have a family member that lives right at that launch ramp, and he sent me some videos of it. So it was quite busy. But what I want council to understand and our constituents to understand is that this is in no way or means a method of isolating one particular group of people by closing the launch ramps. And I think the misnomer is out there that by doing this, we're limiting access to our seasonal residents. Nothing could be further from the truth. We have a huge influx of tourists coming in the next 2 to 3 weeks, right through the summer. And the tourists, if I can differentiate between seasonal residents, cottagers, and tourists have no property in the township. They don't pay taxes in the township. They use our playground to come up, fish, ski, swim, enjoy the federal campgrounds out on the islands. The only access for tourism to get on the water if the marinas are closed are through our public launch ramps. I tried to find some figures to substantiate and pull the stats on what our seasonal tourist rate is in the township of Georgian Bay. I figured it would be about 10 times what the seasonal residents population is. And as near as I can find, it's more 40 times what the seasonal residents are. We only know that from the Port Severn boat ramp because we have the stats on the amount of parking through the electronic and data collection of the meter. But that launch ramp is pretty much exclusively used by tourists, come up from the city, launch, go out, play on the waters, and then go home at the end of the day. And that parking lot is completely full, overflow, parking on the grass, parking on neighbors' properties, everything during the startup. So I just wanted to clarify that me supporting the closing of the launch ramps was not a direct attack or centering out the seasonal residents. I've had lots of emails from our seasonal residents stating things like they pay taxes and they have the right to come to the property and isolate themselves, and they do their 2-week quarantine, and that's all fine. But the directive from the province is shut things down, and we have not. So I'm going to support closing the launch ramps.
I was worried for a moment there, Councillor Wojcik, that you're going to get into our second topic. Anybody else wish to speak with regards to the motion in front of us on closing the launch ramps? Councillor Hazelton, I think I see you waving. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me here? So the feedback I'm going to provide is based on an extensive polling of interests in the community, and also a couple of specific comments. So first of all, the specific comments. I have heard from real estate people who have indicated that they use that ramp in the absence of the marinas being open where they can park their boats. They use that ramp to get access to properties for real estate purposes, and surveyors use the ramp to get access through the water to be able to do their surveying work. So they feel very strong, and this is not just one, but this is 3 of the major real estate operations in the hamlet, in the township, that are all being stating very strongly that they feel that the ramp should be open. So we've heard previously at the previous meeting the need for commercial access. We've heard today the need for commercial access. In the survey or the kind of request for input that I put out, which included over 600 communications, of which I got over a 10% response. I had no one saying that the ramps should be closed, except for to support what Councillor Cooper was suggesting. This is a combined concept of access. So if you're going to block everybody, then yeah, go ahead and close the ramps. But if you're going to allow the road access seasonal cottagers, then you really can't be seen as blocking off access to all of the water access properties, because then you're essentially pitting one group of property owners against the other. Now, that may not be the case in the other wards, but in Ward 4 and in Georgian Bay, that is definitely the case. And so there is no way that I can support, based on the feedback that I've got from a very broad number of people in the community, there's no way that I could support closing the ramps.
Councillor Douglas.
I think I spoke quite extensively on this last week, and I will just echo what my fellow councillors, or some of them, are saying. Unfortunately, my residents in my area, in my ward, don't feel the same way as Councillor Hazelton's constituents. Obviously, they feel quite strongly that everything should be closed in regards to the ramps. We're the last ones that seems to be doing this. And in an effort to try and help the situation, get it under control, or try and help them flatten that line, we need to be doing whatever we can in our communities to help that. This, it cannot be an all or nothing situation, in my opinion, because we don't have control on part of that. So I think just because we don't have control on part of it, shouldn't be that we do nothing. We should be doing whatever we can, whatever is at all possible, and work on the other situation the best we can. For that reason, and for the reason that the people in my constituents in my area, in my ward, have voiced their opinion quite strongly, of some of which you've probably seen emails of recently, as recent as yesterday. So I think it's quite important that we do everything we can to help stop this virus from moving around. And the stay at home has been clearly stated by all avenues here, that we should, as a community and as a country as a whole, be staying put, basically, to try and get this under control. So for that reason, I am in support of closing the ramps. It is not to target one group over another. It is simply because we do have control to do that. Whereas the other, as of yet, until maybe our next conversation, we can find a solution to that. But I do support the motion on the table.
All right, Councillor Wanko, I'm going to give my little bit, and then we'll do a second round. First of all, based on what I've heard so far, I'm going to actually call for this vote after our second round. I think Councillor Jarvis made an important point, is that this is something that is a township matter, whereas our second discussion is, I'm going to call it more of a provincial matter, and how we respond to the province. I'm also going to suggest that I heard Councillor Hazelton's remarks about some people who will be using that ramp. I think if what they are doing is an essential service, then they're allowed to use a marina for that essential service. And I think that's an important distinction, that marinas can support an essential service. They just cannot support recreational or seasonal residence type service. And therefore, I think that I'm going to be siding with those who believe that we should close our ramps, because I think, given the pandemic and the seriousness of it and the great concern that many people have, I think it is the right thing to do. With that, I will start round two, and Councillor Wanko, I already saw your hand up.
Well, I just wanted to highlight a point that was brought up by Councillor Hazelton. The reason I want to support closing down the marinas is I think I want to support the idea of having stricter controls of everybody coming up here, both road access and water access. So that's where I'm coming from. I think in the next discussion, we'll talk about that, but I think we should be talking about keeping everybody away. And if that's the case, then we should be closing our ramps. So that's kind of where I'm coming from this. So I'll be arguing that in the next one. But when you get to the vote, can I ask for a recorded vote, please?
I think given it's electronic, it's going to be an almost automatic recorded, but I guess we'll get Ms. Way to read out the names. Councilor Bocek.
Yeah, just further to my last statement, I think we have to look at the pandemic first and understand that because seasonal residents that have road access are going against the will of the province and coming up to their cottage, which can lead to the spread of the virus. I don't think using the statement that it's an unfair playing ground. If the seasonal water access cottagers also want to break the rules of the province and come up and add to the problem, I don't see how the road access people breaking the provincial ordinance, and you want to do the same because they're doing it. I don't see the reasoning behind that. We're trying to slow the influx of people from traveling. And as I said earlier, my real fear is the thousands of people that are going to be coming up, the weekenders, the tourists, and that's their only access is our public launch ramps. Thank you, Peter.
Councilor, okay, thank you. Councilor Cooper.
Thank you. And as I stated at the outset, I'm unfortunately going to have to vote against this because we're looking at it in isolation. I realize that they're two different issues in a sense, but they are access related. And so to date, we have done nothing as it pertains to the majority of people that are accessing Georgian Bay by road and subsequently at their waterfront places, maybe by boat as well. So I'm not going to support this resolution. Happy to support it sometime in the future, but not right now. And I don't like voting on it in isolation. The vote's no.
Councilor Hazelton.
Thank you. So I'd like to address a couple of topics or comments that have been made here. First of all, the idea that if it's an essential service, that the marinas can service the real estate and surveyors. Sadly, the marinas are now in a position where they have to choose to interpret the law. They have to determine whether this is an essential service or not. They put themselves at risk legally if they have made the wrong choice, and they are choosing to be ultra conservative and say no across the board, except in absolutely hardcore situations. So that's a big concern of mine, where we are then putting the marinas in that responsible situation to interpret the law. That's not their job. Secondly, the definition of a primary residence. We have seen, and this was forwarded, I believe, to all of council, that Canada and the CRA determine a primary resident on a variety of criteria. And joyfully, when I read through it, I said, geez, I am now qualified as a primary resident in the Township of Georgian Bay, even though I don't have a driver's license that suggests that. But once again, if I go to the marina and suggest that, I'm putting the responsibility on the marina to assess whether or not they believe that and are willing to defend that in court, and I don't expect them to. And so, again, that is another issue. And so those are two key issues of why we shouldn't be making this decision. The province hasn't made this decision. They've only made it with respect to recreational boating and recreational access, and this is not recreational access. Another data point that I think it's important is I have heard from Village Marine there was only 10 boats at the boat launch ramp in Honey Harbor over the weekend. So that is not a significant number. They did tell me that there's a huge demand for people to park at their property, but of course they're saying no. There is a huge demand for people to be parking at the old schoolhouse, and presumably that is shut down and people can't. And so the parking issue shouldn't be an issue. But as I pointed out in the communication that I circulated to everybody, we are talking about such a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of people in this community that could be potentially violating. And as Councillor Cooper has said, this really should be talked about. If we are going to block people from using the ramp, then what we should be talking about is, are we going to block everybody from coming to the township? And as I mentioned in my communication, blocking 10 boats a day is like 1% of the water access community. If you really, if people are really animated and emotional about this topic, they should be talking to all of their neighbors who are road access properties, because they're very easy to find. You just see their car in their driveway, and boom, you just go and talk to them. But that also is really a topic, as Councillor Cooper pointed out, deciding as a township who has the right to go to their cottage. That is a provincial jurisdiction. I think we need to step aside. The province has not forced and legislated boat ramps to year-round properties or seasonal water access properties. They have not legislated that to be closed. And so I think we need to step aside and allow the province to do the jurisdiction that they have. I have to say, again, this is definitely a no vote.
Councillor Jarvis, followed by Councillor Douglas.
I appreciate the comments from Councillors Hazelton and Cooper and Douglas here. Councillor Douglas indicated, and I think in a way I support the concept, that we need to be seen to be assisting the governments in trying to arrest this pandemic as much as we can, even though it's a small effort by closing down the ramps. On the other hand, if you look at what Councillor Hazelton has said and the observations made by Councillors Bochek and Wianco, there's not much use going on with the ramps. But it does lead to a question on my part to Chief Van Dam. Is I gather from our last council meeting that I know emergency services has access to the lake. Is that still the case? And would that mean that those with permanent residents on the lake, and I'm thinking there are a couple of people I know that have permanent residences that are water access, how do they get access to those cottages if we close down the ramps and the marinas are refusing to help anybody out because they need to be closed or perceive that they need to be closed? Question for Chief Van Dam.
Chief, we can't hear.
Can't hear you, Tony. No.
Looks like he's about to hit with a hammer.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, we'll do it this way then. So just because we're closing the boat ramps down, that doesn't mean that people would not be given certain access. So what the proposal is going to be, that we'll be putting some concrete blocks up with some chain, because the emergency services still needs to access those properties. And we do have permanent residents that will or may need to access their residence, as well as though their boats are classified as essential service for them to get to their property. So they may need to take their boat out to a repair shop. So the proposal is that we'll have some signage there that allows that person, that business that may be deemed essential, to come forward, contact the bylaw department. We're working on a schedule now that we'll have somebody available every day during regular business hours, maybe extended business hours, to allow these people to go. And the fire department will have keys to the chains to access for any emergency situation.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Jarvis?
No, I'm wondering how that might address the concerns voiced by Councillor Hazelton. Councillor Van Dam, I'd rather Chief Van Dam again. Is it possible that somebody who deemed themselves to be essential service in whatever form or other would be in contact with you and would be told, no, they can't get access to the ramp?
That is possible, that we may deny access. It's going to be essential services. The other part that we're looking at is affidavits that people we're not going to be there to get into an argument with them. And if they can prove to us through an affidavit, through a lawyer, that that's their permanent residence, whatever, we're willing to take that piece of paper. One of the things this morning in our enforcement meeting is that they're advising us it's the officer's discretion whether they are going to allow them or not to allow them to their properties.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, Councillor Douglas, I believe you were next.
Thank you. Just wanted to address a couple things that were said by various councillors. I think something that we need to, or maybe we are thinking about this, or I would like to say, is that one of the things that we're trying to do here is, I realize this is unequitable because some people that have the drive-in properties can get to their properties. And so it appears that we are not being equitable. We don't have control on that at this point. However, hopefully we're going to get solutions to that. I think what we're trying to really do is be a part of, pandemics are not fair to everybody. And that's unfortunate, but we have to do what we can to help stop the movement from the hotspots, which right now are primarily in the Toronto area, or the bigger city centers, I should say. For us, that would be moving south, from bringing it up. And it's not, like a lot of people have said to me that, listen, we're going to bring our supplies and if we get sick, we're going back down to the city. I think the bigger concern is if you infect people up here, then the residents up here are going to be taxing the actual medical services that we have up here. So that's one thing that I, would like to say about the closing of these ramps. Again, it's not to target individuals or people that have water access versus otherwise. Nobody should be traveling. And the fact that people are doing that, that have road access and water access, that speaks volumes as to the responsibility to the community as a whole. The second thing that I'd like to just say is that the stopping of people going in that are essential services, the marinas, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there has been something that was put out that, if you supply the marinas with your, that identifies who you are and what your essential services is, they can make that decision to open up their gates for you or for them, or the boat launches for them. And again, Chief Van Dam, I have a question for you actually on this. Is it our bylaw that has jurisdiction on this, or is it actually OPP that is working together with you, or you're working together with them to make these decisions, and for ticketing or fining?
So after a discussion again this morning with the provincial police, all matters of, I'm going to say, concern regarding enforcement are to go to the Ontario Provincial Police. The Ontario Provincial Police at that point will make a decision based on their availability.
Okay.
Then they're going to pass it off to the bylaw department. The bylaw department then has the authority under the provincial order to enforce and educate. Hopefully that's all we need to do is educate. There was a number of times this weekend where that did happen. Need assistance, then we will notify the OPP and they will come to assist us.
Okay, well, I think I got most of that. I think you froze a couple times there, so we lost a little bit. Okay, so that answers a little bit of the question. It sounds to me from the parts that I did get from you is that the OPP are really the enforcement area that makes the decisions, and they will be relying on you for some help at times, correct?
The Cole note says that's correct.
Okay, cool. That'll do for now. There are other questions that I've put out there that I'm hoping that we get some answers back on for clarification for people that want to travel or are traveling in regards to ticketing. And I don't know that you have answers, Jessica. I don't know whether Jessica got answers on that, but I think for the general public, that a lot of the calls that are coming in is, okay, go ahead, Jessica, sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that based on questions that were submitted by Councillor Douglas yesterday, there's no tickets to be given at this time, since there are no laws stating that you cannot go to your cottage or you cannot go to your secondary residence. I heard this morning, Chief Van Dam told me that somewhere else there was OPP on an off-ramp asking people where they were heading, but I'm not sure if that was maybe a reserve of some sort, because as far as I know, the OPP don't have the authority at this moment to pull people over just to ask where they're going, because there is no law stating that you cannot be on the road or on the water at this time. At this moment, I'm still waiting to hear news from what the Premier has stated, because he was supposed to make an announcement at 1 o'clock to extend the order until May 12th or 13th. But I'm still waiting to hear if he has done so just yet. But at this time, there's nothing really for us to fine or ticket.
Okay, if I may respond to that. So I guess what I'm kind of curious about then is, I realize what you're saying here, but is there not, police, in my understanding, have been given the authority, if you read the OPP's website, to act on what the emergency services, any special orders under that from the province. My understanding is that there's non-essential travel can be ticketed. Am I incorrect in knowing that? And I think this is the question everybody's asking. There's no clarity whatsoever, and nowhere that I can find where there's clarity as to what is actually to be enforced and not to be enforced, or what is in play and what's not. So that's one thing that maybe somebody can get back to us, just so we can give our residents that information. The other thing, I just want to make a quick note, and then I'll just pass on the baton here. You know, Councillor Hazelton brought up that there's, you know, very few people using these ramps. I think, just to echo what Councillor Bocek is saying, I'm not so sure that we are not just concerned about what's going on right now, but we are up and coming into our good weather. More and more people are going to want to use this. More and more of the people that do not have properties up here are going to want to use those boat launches to access the lakes for recreation, for camping, for, you know, that is the only way that they can get into some of these lakes. So I don't think that's the information that I don't think it's quite accurate to say that it's a very minute. We could have a very big problem coming down the road. So anyways, for that reason, again, I'm very much in support that we do the best we can to help flatten this thing out and try and keep the hotspots where they are, so that we don't transmit the virus up here.
Thank you. Not seeing any other hands at the moment. Councillor Hazel, I believe you've already spoken twice to the matter. Sorry. All right, with that, do you want me to read the motion, or are we going to see it on a whiteboard?
It should be shown on the whiteboard, and just so everyone knows, when it takes up half of your screen, it doesn't mean that we've all been dropped. We're just moved.
Okay, so we see the motion in front of us. I have it moved by Councillor Bocek, seconded by Councillor Douglas. And I believe, was Councillor Wienko asked for a recorded vote?
That's correct.
Ms. Way, could you proceed with that then, please?
Perfect. Recorded vote was requested by Councillor Wienko. Councillor Wienko, how do you vote?
No. I mean, yes, close them down, right? Yeah, yes.
Just, okay. Perhaps we should read the motion one more time, sir.
Okay. The motion reads, whereas the province of Ontario declared a state of emergency on March 17th, 2020, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas the Township of Georgia Bay made a declaration of emergency on March 27, 2020, amid the COVID-19 pandemic, and whereas the province of Ontario deemed marinas as non-essential service on April 3rd, 2020, and whereas the province of Ontario ordered the closure of all communal or shared public or private outdoor recreational amenities everywhere in Ontario on March 30th, 2020. Now therefore be it resolved that council hereby closes the municipal-owned boat launches for public access, and that the municipality-owned boat launches will remain closed until the province has ended the order which deems marinas as non-essential services, and that the unbudgeted cost to a maximum of $7,000 be approved for the concrete barriers. In other words, if you want the ramps closed, you would vote yay.
Correct.
Back to you.
Okay.
Ms. Way.
Having read the motion, Councillor Wienko, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Bocek, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Douglas, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Hazelton, how do you vote?
No.
Councillor Jarvis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Cooper, how do you vote?
No,
Mayor Kustier, how do you vote?
Yes.
Let the record show 5-2, the motion carries.
All right, thank you very much. The next topic on our agenda is access for seasonal residents. And I know both Councillors Cooper and Hazelton were encouraging this discussion. I don't know which of the two of you would like to initiate it. I think Councillor Cooper was the first with the request. Do you want to initiate the conversation, Councillor Cooper?
yeah, I'm not going to cover a lot of ground at the moment. I think there's been quite a bit of discussion about this. I think that the township needs to be much more proactive as it pertains to what's transpired here. I think we should be advising the province we're in a very unique situation. The township of Georgian Bay is, I think, the only place in Ontario that has such a high percentage and number, frankly, not just percentage, but number of water access seasonal residents who have been impacted by the closure of marinas because they are perceived to be recreational, not transportation. And that in and of itself is problematic. So my suggestion is that I think we need to consider not just individually sending messages to the Premier. I start with the Prime Minister, actually, who's been not following the rules in Ontario, and other politicians in Ottawa, going to their seasonal residences last weekend, I might add. So we could start with the Prime Minister and work our way down to the Premier and Minister Mulroney and our MPP, and suggest that there needs to be some very careful consideration to what's going on in cottage country, shall we say, I would say recreational properties across Ontario. And that the provinces seem to miss the boat because 95% of the, this is a guess on my part, but I don't think I'm far off, 95% of the recreational properties are drive-to. And nothing's being done about that. And you can say, well, what is the province supposed to do about it? Fine people. It'd be very simple. If you are at your residence, your waterfront residence in our township, and your driver's license says Vaughan, Ontario, you get a fine, and it's $500, and it's $5,000 second time. I think that's what the province needs to be doing, and I think our council needs to take this at hand, because I think our residents would be expecting us to try and create a more sensible approach to this. And if people are going to stay away, let's really get some people staying away, not just a few of them. Those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton, you're also behind this. So I'm going to give you a chance to speak, and then we'll go. I see Councillor Bochek's hand already.
You can let the others talk first.
All right, then it's going to Councillor Bochek.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I concur with Councillor Cooper's comments on this access rule. Unfortunately, the province has not given any teeth to anything to allow any intervention in keeping people away, limiting the amount of travel. I do want to commend the seasonal water access cottagers for staying away last weekend. I did my rounds, and I could clearly see that there was a lot of traffic in the road access communities, and on the water access communities, very, very little action. So I commend the water access residents for staying at home, doing what's right, and I encourage all of the road access people to follow. I don't know, I like the idea of door-to-door checking driver's licenses to see where your principal residence is. Councillor Hazelton made a very good point that it's very easy to change your residence, mostly for tax purposes, capital gains and things like that. I don't think anybody would want to change their permanent residence to their secondary home. But I agree, there's not enough being done to control the road access residents. And we're not in control of that. So we really need to push hard to the province and get some sort of declaration that this has to stop, and a method in which they're going to achieve that goal. This could be short term. It could be 4 weeks, depending on what comes out of Queen's Park this afternoon. And if things turn around quicker, then I understand things could be lifted, some closures, and that could be lifted even sooner. But all councillors that have spoken to this matter agree, I believe, in my personal conversations with everybody, the road access cottagers are the real concern, and it's the one thing that we have no control over, or I don't know of any way that we have control over it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rienko, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
I think we're all tend to agree that we should do everything in our power to try to convince people to stay at the principal cottages, be it water access, be it road access, or whatever. So basically, what can the township do? Now, I've been racking my brain about this, and I think there's 3 things we can do. One is that we can try to lobby the provincial government to come up with some stronger measures, possibly the fines. I don't really care. The point is, I think we could lobby the province on that. Secondly, I think we could work through the district. This is not just a Township of Georgian Bay issue. It's also a district issue. It's a cottage country issue throughout Ontario. So there could be some lobbying there done. And so maybe, I don't know if the mayor can talk to the chair up at the district and see what they can do on that. That's a possibility. The third thing that we could do, and I think I saw this on Facebook, I think Councillor Douglas passed it around on Facebook, is to put up a sign at all the cottage roads that come off the main highways. And basically it says only permanent residents beyond this point. I think that's quite clear that we don't want the seasonal population showing up. So those signs, I think we have the authority to put those signs up, although some of them might be on district roads. We can get that worked out, but that would be a good idea. In your face sign saying only permanent residents beyond this point. So there's 3 ideas that we as a township could do. Beyond that, I don't think talking to the federal government might do any good. But anyway, those are just my comments.
My issue here is for a point of clarification from the provincial government with regards to the closing of marinas. And I'm wondering, I realize this is a provincial matter and a little higher up, almost a federal matter in some ways. And I like the idea that we approach our provincial government in some form or other. Is there not a way we can approach them with the request for clarification on exactly what they mean by closing down the marinas, or what their intentions are, being that residents in the Georgian Bay use the marinas as transportation, not as a means of access to the water to go fishing or be tourists, for lack of a better word. And since transportation doesn't seem to have been shut down, generally speaking, when we think about roads, as we all evidently have seen, and since our means to our residences, whether we deem them seasonal, permanent, or whatever, is by water and via the marinas, then I think that we really need to approach this from the standpoint of essential transportation. And that's what it is for us residents going out onto the water. So how do we get some sort of our concerns over to the provincial government from the municipality, if not also from the district, as Paul maybe suggested, that transportation be addressed in more specific terms, water, road. If we can't shut it off on the roads to seasonal residences, we shouldn't be shutting off transportation via the water. And that's where my concern is. And I think we need...
Sorry to interrupt, Councillor Jarvis. It appears that Mayor Coetzee is no longer with us, which means we need to pause the meeting.
Rats, I was just getting on a good rant too.
I know you were.
Well, I'll be patient.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Karen, my question was, this meeting has not adjourned, so we're just standing by waiting for Mayor Coetzee.
Correct. Similar to waiting for quorum to come back, we need to have our chair. Just
Thank you.
one moment.
Thank you.
So Councillor Cooper, is that Bertram behind you?
A which?
A Bertram, is that a Bertram print behind you on the wall?
Bertram's a boat, a Bartram is a painting.
So yeah,
I'm teasing you.
thank you for that
Yes, it is.
clarification. Either
Yeah,
way,
That's a Georgian Bay painting from the Sans Souci area where you see the rocks are quite striped.
yeah.
I'm trying to watch the premier speak at the moment, but my internet is also wonky.
Yes, Madam CAO, your transmission to this Zoom is also very choppy and broken up too, so you must have a bandwidth or an internet speed issue there.
It's called I live in cold water.
I'm surprised you don't have internet at the township, because I bounce off the same tower here, because I can see the township building from my home, and we seem to have okay internet here. Must be something on the township end.
Today's announcement so far seems to be mostly aimed towards long-term caregivers. I'm waiting for the Ontario information flash on the screen, and I'll let you know.
I have it streaming as well.
All right, I think I'm back.
There you are, Peter.
I don't. Okay. Sorry about that, but my internet connection disappeared. And it disappeared while Councillor Wienka was in speech.
Councillor Jarvis, I believe.
Councillor Jarvis, and I know he was putting us to sleep, but go ahead.
Yeah, I think that actually, Councillor, that our mayor cut out while Councillor Wienka was speaking before I spoke. And to the mayor, my issue is with regards to getting clear definition or clarification on what the provincial government is intending with their closing of, indirectly or otherwise, however you want to interpret, of marinas, in that they're allowing transportation to seasonal residents via road. They aren't stopping people. Why should they be stopping people who use the waterways as transportation to their seasonal residences? So my theory is we either stop everybody from getting into the seasonal residence, whether it's road or water access, or via the provincial government, we allow that water access as a mode of transportation, or as a mode of transportation to seasonal residents, be opened back up again. I think a note from the municipality would be more relevant than individuals, though individuals also help through their MPP. And I like the idea of Paul suggesting that maybe we do something through district as well. Anyway, I'd like to know if it's possible we could address something to the government from the municipality in that regard. That's it.
All right, thank you. I apologize again for being cut out. I apparently have an unstable connection here. When I left, Councillor Wienka was talking about putting signs on the roads I don't know if there was any more points that Councillor Wanko raised, or Councillor Jarvis, if you said anything that I missed initially. And I apologize to everybody for this awkwardness.
I had nothing more. I think I actually did a better summary the second time around anyway, so I'm fine.
Okay. All right, who else would like to speak to the matter? Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I'm in total agreement with my fellow councillors. I mean, it would be great to find something that we can do to stop everyone at this point that's not taking it upon themselves to see this as serious as it is and just not be traveling. It looks like we've lost Chief Van Dam, so I really can't ask the question that I guess it sounds like there's no ticketing at all going on for any non-essential travel, which I think most of us are all under or a lot of people I know, including myself, we're under the impression that that was in place. So I don't really know what teeth we really have to stop people from coming up to their cottages. I mean, so I am in total agreement that we need to do something as a township, perhaps in the way of lobbying the provincial government and the feds. But by the way, just for clarification, it wasn't me that sent that sign. Just wanted to make that clear. Do I agree with that kind of, signage? I'm not really sure, and I'm not sure how effective it is or whether it's just going to offend people. But at this point, whatever we can do as a township and as perhaps through district to discourage this, I think it's really important that we try to do it, just not only from the equitable value point, if we're not segregating one part of our seasonal to the other, but also just in terms of what can we do here to stop the travel that's going on from these hot zones. So I totally support with Councillor Cooper and Hazelton and various other councillors are saying whatever we can do, we should be doing as a township for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton, I believe I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just going to pick up on one of the threads that Councillor Douglas had and relating to kind of pitting residents against each other. I think that we unfortunately in the last motion exacerbated that problem. This whole topic of who can come to the cottage, who can come to their properties in our township, which is a provincial matter, and the province has not said categorically. In other words, they say by defining fines what you can and can't do. They have recommendations, but they are clearly only recommendations. The Prime Minister doesn't behave by them, and thousands of residents that live south and outside of cottage country are clearly not abiding by the recommendations. So until you get to a point of fine, I don't believe that you're actually at a point where you're controlling people. So what we have here is a situation where we have something that's extremely unfair. We have road access properties being able to access their properties, and we have a government who has come along and inadvertently sent out something that has caused great problems in our communities. So what the government has done is they have sent out from the Ministry of Transportation a note basically saying that they, well, not just basically, explicitly saying that they wanted to close these marinas about the because of concerns about the premature opening of recreational boating. That is not, as Councillor Jarvis said, that is not our Georgian Bay experience. And I doubt that it's also either a Go Home Lake experience either. People get in their boats and use it for transportation. That is something that is more unique in our communities than it is either anywhere in the District of Muskoka or in the province of Ontario. And I'd like to kind of just highlight a couple of things here. I mentioned earlier that I sent out a communication. It went out to probably over 500 people. I wasn't asking for specific comments. I was just saying, if you have comment, please feel free. I got I got 62 responses out of all of that, which to me in this kind of 24-hour turnaround is phenomenal. I have a 94% of the people saying that they want to find a way to encourage the government to respect the things that are unique about Georgian Bay. And I can tell you many of the people were responding with from water access, from road access properties saying, don't stop me from getting to my cottage. But we also understand that water access properties should be able to access their properties if we can get access to ours. And so when we understand that the province sent out a communication that was intended to stop recreational boating, and what we are doing is not recreational boating, I think it behooves us to communicate to the province so that the province understands this. Now, I doubt that the district will understand it. In fact, I think the province will probably be more understanding than the district, because the district has a very different set of almost exclusive road access properties. So I think what we need to be doing is we need to be lobbying the province to do two things. Number one, all of the marinas that service water access properties are going to need to get the boats in the water sometime in the not too distant future. It is always a scramble for these marinas to get their boats in the water. And if we assume that the province's lockdown for the next 4 weeks is going to continue with the status of the marinas, then the marinas really need to find a way to be permitted, without challenging things in the courts, to be permitted to put these boats in the water. I'm not saying to allow people to use those boats, but the marinas have an enormous amount of work to get the boats in the water and get them ready for their customers. And I can tell you that at least 2 of the marinas that I've spoken to are very anxious to get going and feel that they can easily social distance in the process of launching boats. So the first thing I think we need to do is lobby the province to understand how things are different and allow these marinas to start launching these boats, so that when the province does open things up, that the marinas are not going to be hounded with extremely impatient customers trying to get them to do the impossible. And then the second thing I think we need to do is lobby the province to understand what a transportation boat user does that is so different from a road access property. Now, I have to tell you that I got flack from some people, some locals in the area, when I said the general Georgian Bay cottager buys all their supplies for the weekend, travels to their marina, gets in their boat, travels to their cottage, doesn't shop locally. Well, sadly, though the personal hate messages I got because of that are, I think, a little displaced. That happens to be the behavior. It actually is the right behavior during this current state of COVID concern. So that behavior is actually, as I say, very different. And, Councillor Cooper, circulated something that, if you want to understand how different seasonal water access properties are in Georgian Bay, all you got to do is look at what happens in Port Carling or some of these other places where on a weekend, people seem to want to get in their cars and drive continuously throughout the weekend to all of the local retail operations, whereas that just doesn't happen in the hamlet, or sorry, in the Honey Harbor or the Georgian Bay area. So it would be really helpful if we as a township understood, first of all, that this is a very different behavior and found a way to communicate that to the province so that we could, number one, allow the marinas to get back into gear and do what they want to do, which is put boats in the water so when their customers can use them, they are available and are ready to go. And then secondly, I hope that the province lifts all these restrictions in 4 weeks, but I don't want to bet on it. And so what we should be doing is actively lobbying the province that if worst case comes and 4 weeks from now, they don't lift the restrictions, that they are at least willing to consider that our style of access to our cottage is not recreational boating, but in fact, transportation boating, and that they should be recognizing that and not putting out a blanket statement like they did previously that was explicitly focused on recreational boating, but has scared all the marinas silly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think we've done one round here, so now I'm going to start round two. And I think Councillor Bochuk, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think all points are valid. I'm hearing a lot of consensus among a lot of things here. One thing we haven't brought up, and I don't know if our Director of Operations, Brad Sokach, are you still there? Can you come on board? Apparently, no. Oh, here he is. Hey, there you are. A great concern I've had a lot of emails from my constituents is one of the groups we have not looked at and need to be looked at is our campgrounds. The seasonal population of campers that come to this area, I think, Brad, you can probably justify this. How many campgrounds do we have in our township, Brad?
Through the mayor, I think I'm the wrong person to ask. Karen, you license them, correct?
Correct. There's 14.
So we have 14 campgrounds here. I know the one that is across the road from me houses about 600 people in the summertime. These campgrounds have lots. The
campgrounds are closed. The province isn't letting any recreational camping take place. So only those who reside in a campground as a permanent resident are permitted to occupy their trailer or model park at this point.
Correct. So to my point exactly, we have these marinas that are following the provincial ordinance to stay closed, and they've put barricades. I've driven to all the marinas. They've put barricades up with signs saying no access to the property. I went to the campgrounds. That's not the same. We have a lot of people that maybe go to Florida for their winter and are snowbirds, and they come back directly to their trailers on Georgian Bay, and they put their 14-foot tinny in the water and away they go, and they're here and it's a summertime. I don't know if we have the ability through our bylaw to make sure that these campgrounds that are supposed to be closed barricade off and sign their properties, because there was a lot of movement this weekend in those campgrounds. Second to that, Crown Land. Crown Land, they've come out and said that there is no use of Crown Land at this time. They've also said that there's no fires allowed. There's a fire ban on. I think we all seen at McCrae Lake this weekend. Cars lined up down both sides of the road, completely full this weekend. -6-degree temperatures. I don't think they're out there without campfires. So my question to Chief Van Dam, do you have any ability to control, ticket, remove people on Crown Land, or is that the OPP and the MNRF?
So with regards to McCrae Lake over the weekend, the maximum cars that were there, the picture that was on Facebook will show you. If you blow up the picture a bit, you will see that the MNR vehicle was the last vehicle in the row. They were there enforcing. We were there a number of times enforcing. There was one person who was camping when the bylaw officer and the MNR person got to that person. They were already in the process of packing up and leaving. Most of those people that were at that there was 20 cars is what Jordan counted, were there for walking purposes only. And currently, if you read the order that's in the provincial, there's nothing against them going onto that property and walking. OPP is there again today, reassured me today that they would be in the McCrae Lake again today. They were there once on the weekend. So there's a number of things, but we're only aware of one person camping. There was a number of people out there that were fishing. That was what most of the people were doing, fishing and walking.
Okay, and as far as the campgrounds go, we know that like marinas, they've been ordered to be closed, but yet we still see movement, and they do have access to the water via their launch ramp. So I'm just wondering if there's a visit that can happen to those to reinsure.
So we will definitely be, I'll make a note here. I've already made the note that on the weekend, we will be visiting some of those campgrounds to ensure that they are closed. I can tell you that we did visit a couple on the weekend, didn't find anything, but the Picnic Island campground, for example, was underwater.
Thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Douglas.
Question to Chief Van Dam. Chief Van Dam, is there, just because I'm still trying to get clarification on this for our residents, you know, there's nothing saying that they can't get to their cottage, which I understand that. Is there anything in process from the OPP that tickets them or prevents them from traveling on the marina roads to get in a boat and go, or to their private residence that's road access? Is there anything at the moment that can be used to stop road access, primarily road access at this point, people traveling? Because, you know, although I understand what Councillor Hazelton said, that people bring all their groceries up, that contrary, really, it is true under most circumstances, but certainly there was grocery stores that were overwhelmed by people this weekend up here that were clearly not residents of the area. And so I'm just wondering, is there anything that the OPP has in place to action at this point to stop this, or no?
For currently, for anybody driving down the road, driving up 400 and onto any of the roadways, there's nothing the OPP can charge them with. It's a recommendation only, so that it's not in the order that they can actually ticket somebody. However, if now the actions that they're doing, so if there's a group of them gathered, then there's an opportunity that a ticket could be laid. However, the province has asked and the OPP has asked is that, first of all, we want to try to educate them about it. And if we need to, then we will enforce. And the ticket is $750.
Okay. So you know, they talk about education and that's all fine and dandy, but I guess my concern is that, you know, we really want to see the stop of movement as the recommendations are. So while we're educating, our virus is running rampant. How long do they plan on doing this education? You know, I'm just saying that, I mean, I think this is admirable that education, and I certainly have been in the position of, as a bylaw enforcement officer myself, of education and not ticketing, but I was not dealing with a virus and a pandemic. So I'm not so sure that I think that's the best way to go. If we're really trying to stop this, we need to stop it now, not in 2 weeks or a month from now when things are out of control. But that's my comments, and I don't know if you have an answer to that. You know, have they put a timeline on that or not? Thank you.
Through your worship, at this point, I'm following the direction from the provincial government, seeing it's their order and their enforcement. I'm only there to pick up the pieces when they fall. And when they can't attend, that's when we're attending. However, this past weekend, I think was a success for us. Bylaw was out there. When we did come across some problems, we educated. Most people respected that. And a number of times we did have conversations with M&R and the OPP, and we were passing difficult people off to them and let them handle it, and they were more than willing to do it.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate the fact that you guys are working at the best rate you can to get some of this under control. Thank you for that.
All right. Anyone else? Councillor Wienko.
I just thought I would step in here and give you my opinion. I don't know if there's any resolutions that have been prepared for this item on the agenda, but I would support any motion that would go forward in the way of trying to convince people not to come up to our township. Far as I know, there is no cases of COVID in our township. I think one of the few townships in Muskoka that does not have a single case, and I want to keep it that way. So any motions that we could come up with that would deter people from coming up here, I would be more supportive. The other issue that was brought up by Councilor Hazelton is the idea that I would be in support of marinas having the option to put in boats as soon as possible. However, not allowing people to access them. I know some of the marinas probably are anxious to get their docks in and to get their boats in on a with reasonable time frame. And I think they should be allowed to do that. However, keep their gates closed until the appropriate time. The other thing I wanted to ask, we are looking for ideas of what the township can do to possibly encourage people to stay home. Does the staff, and I guess I'm going to ask Jessica, does the staff have any ideas that they could suggest of ways of discouraging people coming up to our township for either tourism or road access or water access or whatever? Is there any ideas that the township can put forward on this?
I'm sure individually we all have our own thoughts that I probably won't share on this platform. But when it comes to, for instance, the idea of closing off roads that have cottages on them, I doubt there's an instance where that road is strictly seasonal residents. There's likely 1 or 2 permanent residents on each road that has seasonal residents on them. So if we chose for any reason to close a road, we could be blocking access to a permanent resident. We have been doing social media. We have been retweeting and everything from the premier asking people to stay home. We have been, there's no order telling people they have to stay home, so we can't take it upon ourselves to order people to do that. So other than just repeating all of the orders and requests that have already come through, there's nothing that we can do to enforce people to stay at home, unless for any reason we could make this resolution short and sweet and say that we want the province to put on a total lockdown. So it's clear to every single person that you can't do anything, as opposed to picking and choosing what it is that is essential and non-essential. So until there's actual order that comes out saying you cannot do any travel whatsoever, no matter where it's to, there's nothing really that we can do at this time, other than hope that people are the recommendation that has come down from the top.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. So yeah, okay. So I don't know if there's any resolutions that the township wants to prepare, but as I say, I wouldn't support any resolutions that would encourage people to come up. But any resolution to discourage them, I would probably entertain.
I'll ask Julie to put up the resolution on the screen now so you can all see that.
Well, that is happening. Does anybody else want to speak to the matter?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Hazelton, followed by Councillor Jarvis.
Can we read the motion and see the whole thing? Right now, we can't see the whole thing. We can't scroll up and down. So maybe she could make her screen bigger or the text smaller, or.
Well, I think, you know, the whereases are pretty obvious as to now, therefores, and that's that we want to see. We're almost there. And I should point out that this motion was drafted based on a variety of input. It's not any particular person that authored it. So I don't think any offense will be taken if we decide to reword it.
So I really think that we need to be looking at perhaps 2 or 3 different variants. I get the feeling that there is a potential strong support for allowing marinas who choose to start launching boats to get that underway, because that's going to have to happen at some point in time. And I think that would be one reasonable standalone motion. Then I think there should be a second motion that allows us as a township to encourage the province to understand that the water access use in Georgian Bay is dominated extensively, probably 95+% through resident-based marinas, water access marinas servicing, I'll say it again, through marinas servicing water access properties. Those are transportation-based uses, and that is not something that the province seems to understand at this point in time. So those are what I think are two separate motions that probably could get reasonable support. Then the third motion that this seems to deal with is attempting to, I think, attempting to prevent travel or encourage the province to fine everybody coming to the their what is perhaps considered a secondary home. And I think that would be a reasonable third type of resolution. I don't think that they are resolutions that should be combined, because they have three independent actions and probably have separate support for each.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jarvis, I believe your hand was up next, and followed by Councillor Bochek. You've already spoken twice, so Councillor Jarvis gets to go.
You know, I think Councillor Hazelton just covered my approach to this whole thing. I like the after the first and that council recommends. I like that line. I'm not so sure about the, well, yeah, define the term of seasonal residence makes sense. But again, I just come down to it. I think it's covered by Councillor Hazelton, but it's just this concept that marinas do need to have, I think, a better idea of what they can't do. And this thought that they should be able to put boats in the lake, as per Councillor Hazelton and Councillor Wianco, without giving people access to their boats, but just so they can get their business started, which is a good idea. And two, I think we just need a proper definition, and maybe that's within whatever we've got here already, of what it means, what transportation to residences actually means. But all in all, I'm happy with what Hazelton is, Councillor Hazelton has suggested here. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councillor Cooper.
Yeah, I think I've only spoken once, and I would support what is being suggested by Councillor Hazelton, and whether we do it in 3 parts or 1 part, I'll leave it to our clerk to decide if that makes sense. But I think what we're covering off here is very sensible, and hopefully the province might get the message, especially if we send this in, and perhaps if we individually also want to tell them, because I think collectively our objectives are very similar, and that is to make sure that we get rid of this pandemic as quickly as possible. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that people aren't spreading it. Thank you.
Okay.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor. I think we need in these resolutions to use the words that the province has used, so that we're not introducing new undefined terms. And so, for example, the province has used the term primary residence. And rather than using seasonal residents and doing other things like non-essential, you know, the definition of water access property is easily understood. Seasonal resident is not. Sadly, the province hasn't defined primary residence either. So I think we want to be careful in our use of these words, that we don't introduce new terms that then have to be fully explained. Anyways, opinions.
Well, we'll keep modifying this. I think. Okay, who have I not heard from in the second round? I think I've heard from everybody in the second round. I would like to speak to the matter a little bit as our clerk works on some of the wording. And I think with regards to the wording, the consequence of this motion, should it pass, would be that we initiate some correspondence with various political individuals. And I think we'll, as we craft that, we'll do it our best to make sure we use some of the phrases they've used in their documentation. I think from my personal perspective, I certainly appreciate the points made. And I think that as Councillor Hazelton has done twice and has been reinforced by numerous other councillors, there's three main areas. But I think I'm also going to say, and this is how Councillor Cooper ended his comments, I think we have to remember our number one objection, our number one purpose to doing all this, our objective, is to slow down the spread of this COVID-19 pandemic. All that I've, or not all, most of what I've heard, most of what I've read over the last couple of weeks with regards to pandemics and how they control it and the differences between one country and another, is those who have practiced isolation in one form or another have been more successful than those who have not. And while I think our province is very well intentioned, clearly simply asking people to behave themselves has not worked. I will say to you, some of the reports I have received with regards to the behavior of some, and I'm not saying all, but some of the people who've come to our area has been, quite frankly, offensive. When I hear people going to our transfer station and happily reporting to the woman receiving them that, oh, I'm just back from Florida, and she is trying to step back because, well, if you're just back from Florida, you're not supposed to be out. You're not supposed to be doing your spring cleaning and taking it to the dump and trying to infect everybody else there. Behavior like that is just not acceptable. And I think we have to make sure that that's our number one goal. And I believe that what the province has failed to do has failed to put enough orders in place, enough fines in place to tell people that when they say self-isolate, stay home, stay inside your residence and don't go out, don't go back and forth. Clearly that message is not getting through, and I believe the province has to do a better job of it, because we as a township, I'm all in favor, and I suspect this meeting is going to go towards getting correspondence written. I'm all in favor of doing that, but I think we also have to recognize we as a township are very limited in what powers we have. And so I think that the fact that many a water access resident feels discriminated against or unfairly treated, I absolutely understand that sentiment, but I think we have to remember, whether we like it or not, the water access resident is actually being forced to do what everybody should be doing. And so we shouldn't, I don't think we should be striving to get permission for the water resident to also break all the rules and intentions, but rather that everybody else follows the rules and intentions. And I may sound a little impatient on this, but when I say some of the correspondence that I read about the behavior of some people out there is just, oh, if I try to be political, I'll say so disappointing, but I can think of a lot worse language to apply to it. I just can't believe it. So that's some of my thoughts on this. How are we doing with the resolution?
Mr. Mayor, I had a question of clarity. I wasn't trying to have a third round. It was simply a question of clarity on the resolution.
Okay, please go ahead.
Council Hazelton had recommended that in this resolution, there be a point to contact the province to find out if marinas could move forward in preparing boats, launching boats, but not having the use of the boats. And my concern is there that we as a municipality don't have the ability to override the province's rules, which is the closure of non-essential businesses, which include marinas. So in listening to Mr. Hazelton's comments and wanting to get the wording right on that, using the wording that is already existing, I think at the same time, we should be very cautious about asking the province to overturn a law that's already been put in place to achieve a goal. So if I can, Mr. Hazelton, you want to recommend to the province that a non-essential business, being a marina, be allowed to open up, bring their staff in, get these boats ready and get them in the water for when the pandemic is lifted, the order to comply is lifted?
That is, I think, a minimal step that we should be taking, and I'm not sure that the wording accomplishes what what I think we should be trying to accomplish. But I'd like to rephrase what you're saying. We're not trying to get the province to necessarily change the laws. We're trying to get the province to recognize where they may need to reconsider things. And by the way, the province and the feds have reconsidered a lot of the legislation that they've been putting out there during this pandemic, because they have not thought it through completely. And when somebody points out a problem, an anomaly, then they have, in some cases, accepted it and made the change. So I think what this, first of all, I don't think all of these and that statements should be there, because I'm not sure we're going to get approval for all of them. I would prefer to see them separated into into 2 or maybe 3 sections. But the second last and that should define the term primary place of residence, which is what the province has used in their legislation. The word seasonal residence doesn't apply. And then the last and that. Somehow we need to craft the words there that what we are doing is what Councillor Bocek said, which is we want to allow the marinas to launch their boats, but we do not want to interrupt the province's definition of when they believe it's safe to travel to away from your home. And so by somehow crafting the words that say, province, please allow our businesses to partially open up and do the work that they need to do, which takes an enormous amount of time to get ready for the season. That doesn't mean you're opening for business. It means that you are working within your borders and only allowing your staff to operate on that property.
I think, Councillor Hazelton, if I may, I think that last and that we should remove the deemed essential business part out of it, because what I think what you're saying, and I think what I heard also from Councillor Rienko and probably head nodding from a few others, is that the marinas should be allowed to prepare for the time when they are allowed to open.
Yes.
I think that's the key, is that they remain closed to the general public with the exception of permanent residents, but they should be allowed to prepare for when the season opens. Because and I haven't heard the announcement yet today, and maybe somebody else has, well, that is taking place while we were during our meeting. But if the province extends the state of emergency to May 12th, and then decides after that the marinas can open, well, that's only a couple of days before the long weekend, and there's going to be a rush of people wanting their boats for the long weekend if the province decides that we can go to our cottage at that time.
Yes.
Councillor Douglas.
Thank you. I'm all in favor of the marinas being able to prepare. I mean, I've had an opportunity to speak to one of our marinas in the area here, and that is a concern for they'll be a couple of weeks behind in getting everybody's boats out. But one of the biggest concerns I have here, when you say get prepared, I'm all for, removing shrink wrap and being prepared to launch. I am not in any way in favor of having boats launched, because then the marinas run into not being able to stop people from just waltzing down the dock, getting in their boats and going, which puts them in a fairly precarious position. They may not condone it, but it's going to happen. If the boats are sitting there in a boat slip, people are going to go to them, whether they park in the public parking lot or park in the marina's private parking lot, which they may not be able to do. They are going to have a way to get to their recreational property. And I just want to clarify, these are recreational properties, which the province is saying, all these should be closed, but nonetheless, the end game is exactly as Mayor Coutier says. We are trying to stop the spread of this virus. So I would hate to encourage anything like dropping all these boats into boat slips, because people are going to find their way to them. I mean, I think that's just clear. And that is going to put our marina operators in an awful position. Taking the shrink wrap off, totally agree. That just is one less step for them, but launching them, not so much.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Just clarification on that particular issue. I think a marina that can't control the activities within the marina, in other words, setting up for the season, then if they can't do that and look after what's under their care, custody, and control, then they shouldn't be allowed to do any opening. I don't see any reason why the boats couldn't be in the water if they have, most of these bigger marinas have people living on them, and they have security issues all the time, and they have to look after the security of the boats of that are the customers' boats. So I really think taking off shrink wrap might apply to some marinas. Many marinas have great big storage areas, and it's a huge job. They're not taking off shrink wrap. They're doing all the sort of mechanical preparations, and then get a boat in the water, and then they go to the next one, and on it goes. So if you look at the boat club or Nautilus, many of the boats are stored in essentially sheds that may have a drop front on them, but no actual shrink wrap. So from a practical perspective, the big job is moving the boats, getting them prepared, and getting them in the water. And anyway, I just don't know that it makes sense to just take off the shrink wrap.
CEO Gunn.
Thank you. Sorry, that was really passionate.
You don't have these things on split screen. I can't see everybody at once.
I just wanted to remind council that this resolution is not about shrink wrap. This resolution is about just drafting a letter to the province to have them review a few of the orders they've put out. Whether they will or not, that will be up to them. But if they do review these, and if they do think that these are worth changing, they will come up with their own terminology, definitions, and regulations. And if they look at this and say, these are good ideas, I highly suspect they will be contacting us. I don't think we have to get into the weeds of how many employees will be taking shrink wrap off boats, for instance, or all those small details when this resolution is just to draft a letter.
All right. I'm just reading the right now. Does any councillor have an issue voting for the resolution, for or against? Let me rephrase that. Sorry, voting on this resolution, given its current wording. We're asking in this resolution that on behalf of the township and council, I write to the Prime Minister, the Premier, MPP Mulrooney, and MPP Miller, and who knows, we might add one or two others in as we go along, and that further that we suggest that seasonal residences, and we can work on the wording a little bit, but seasonal residents be deemed as non-essential, including all travel by any means to and forth, and that we want them to better define what a primary place of residence actually is, and that we want them to allow marinas to get prepared for the time when they may be allowed to open. And I think the only thing I don't see in that resolution, but I would certainly put it as part of the letter, is the distinction between recreational activity versus transportation to and from one's residence, whether it's a seasonal or permanent resident. Some of the boating that we do on Georgian Bay and in inland lakes in our area, because of the abundance of water access properties, is not strictly recreational, but it's also call it utilitarian. We need to do it to get to our places. So I think this this, as it's now worded, though I'm seeing it's being changed a little bit, does cover the intent that I heard from numerous councillors as what they would like to see in this correspondence. And quite frankly, I'd be very pleased to be involved in getting correspondence out to the provincial people with regards to this, and sending a copy or a letter to Prime Minister Trudeau. Not sure how much jurisdiction he has directly over a lot of these activities, but nonetheless, it's good to keep him informed. Okay, shall I read?
Peter, just a little technical point.
Please.
I think we better find out the title for Mulroney. I think she's the Attorney General or Solicitor General or something like that.
I don't believe that is, the Solicitor General is somebody else, actually.
MP Mulroney is the Minister of Transportation in Ontario.
Thank you. Not
Still-
just so she's not just an MPP. That's all I was saying. It would be wise to call her give her a title.
She's the Minister of Transportation. I would think that Sylvia Jones, who's a Solicitor General, might also be copying on this letter, because the Solicitor General's office that is actually putting out the orders. And I would also suggest that Minister Clark, Municipal Affairs and Housing, could be copied on this, because he's should be sensitive to what the municipalities are facing and their challenges to implement the intentions of the province.
Thank you very much. And I hope you'll encourage the Prime Minister to stay home on the weekends. Thank you.
For the good of his health, of course.
I'll tweet him.
Can I say something here? I don't think my hands, can I say something? Because my hand's not being recognized.
Oh, I didn't see it. Sorry. Please go ahead, and then Councillor Jarvis.
Okay. I think I'm okay with the two and that, but the very last one I have some problems with, because it doesn't really say that we recommend that the marinas prepare for the boating season, but have some kind of control as to the access of these boats. So I think it needs to be revised so that they can prepare, but still not allow people to use their boats. And if that's a concern, I think the marinas have to have some kind of control of how these boats, can be used. Like, for example, if they don't put the batteries in the boats, it can't be used. So maybe they can, make sure these boats can't be used by not putting the batteries in, or not turning over the keys, or whatever could happen. But the idea is to prepare for the season, but secure the boats so they can't be used until the rules are lifted. But it doesn't really say that in the last paragraph, and I'd rather have that done before I approve it.
I think something like be allowed to prepare for the boating season while remaining closed to seasonal residents.
Sorry, Your Worship, may I interrupt?
Yes.
And explain the thought process behind that? So there's been multiple comments surrounding what we do or do not want the marinas to do. And I don't think it's for us to say what all of their work is within those operations that may be in preparation of just launching the boats into the water, putting them in their stocks. If there's maintenance to the docks that perhaps need to be done in order to permit those boats to be launched. That's why I left it more of an open-ended seasonal operations that would need to be conducted right now, that is not inclusive of the transportation. So those operations may be permitted. I don't think it's fair for us to say that we can or cannot carry on, or what their actual business operations are, which is why I left it as nondescript.
Okay, but I think it would be clearer if we said something to the effect of be allowed to prepare for the boating season while remaining closed to seasonal residents.
I've been asked not to include the term seasonal residents within this motion.
What you could do is take out the word transportation and say not inclusive of owner operation, which is what Councillor Wienko suggested, taking the keys and not giving the keys out. So I think you're almost there, but continue operations not inclusive of allowing owner operation.
But owner operation is vague. Then you don't know if you're talking about the marina or the boats, the boat owners.
Okay, boat owner operation.
Okay, but
And I agree with that.
the
I
current,
feel like this is minutia that maybe could be defined in the letter, not necessarily the resolution. Sorry, Your Worship.
Then I can't support the resolution the way it's written. It's got to be clear in the resolution. I can't support it.
I think we have to change this wording. Because right now the order says that marinas must be closed. I think what we want to do is get because the order says marinas have to be closed, we want to permit them to prepare for the boating season, and we'll leave it up to them what they do and how they do it, but prepare for the boating season while remaining closed.
I'm good with that.
And that was my concern too, Mr. Mayor, per Cynthia's and everybody else's note is that, yeah, if the boat's in the water and it's ready to go, then somebody's going to go down and take it out. That's just going to happen. So if we can be more definitive in how the marinas operate here, that would be great.
Well, but again, I don't want to tell the marinas how to do it. And by the way, if somebody goes on marina property and takes their boat, then they're trespassing and can face that additional charge.
Granted.
But I think it's important that we simply, what I believe that we're simply asking is that marinas be allowed to prepare for the boating season while remaining closed, because right now the provincial order is that they have to be closed.
Can I say something, Your Worth?
You may, and I apologize. Before you speak, Theo Gunby, I appreciate people speaking up at this moment. It's not quite proper procedure, but given the fact I can't see everybody at once, we're making do.
Thank you. And I did get kicked out for a few moments, so who knows what my frozen face looked like. I'm sure it was quite funny. And I also may have missed a couple points stated, but what I recommend is we can all hear exactly what you're saying. You're all on the same page. The resolution, I would recommend, be kept a little more broad to give them more leeway if they feel like making a decision. But with us crafting the letter and the mayor signing it, I'm sure we can ensure that all the same points you're saying about the services the marinas offer can be in the letter itself.
All right, I'm much better with the way it reads now, and I'm going to ask every councillor whether they're prepared to vote on this one way or another.
Can I interrupt for 1 second, please? We've talked about one other and that clause that may be considered, and I would like to at least separate this into two resolutions. Put the first and that clause in one resolution and the other and that clauses in another resolution. The fourth and that clause that we have talked about is one that we are trying to appeal to the province to understand that the boating community in our township predominantly use the boats that they store at marinas as transportation, and that is not something that the province has understood.
Well, okay, but I would argue that that's not a recommendation to the province. That's just information to be part of the letter as we make these recommendations.
Fine.
Because I don't think council is going to recommend to the province that boats are transportation.
Why? That's what the overwhelming support that I got from the community was agreeing with, that we help the province understand that the boats that are stored at marinas for water access properties are transportation. That is a very unique characteristic in our community, where that is a dominant characteristic of most of the marinas. Not all of the marinas. There are recreational boating marinas, but as we know, in our township, you can't sever a property out in a water access area without guaranteeing that there's a marina access to be able to get transportation to and from that water lot.
Well, how may I propose then that, and if we want to put something like that in, to simply, and the council recommends that the province of Ontario recognizes that boats are needed for transportation to water access only properties.
Perfect.
Did you get any of that, Clerk Way? Do you want me to repeat it? Let's see how close I come. I'm just using the first sentence of that, and that council recommends that the province of Ontario recognizes that boats are the means of transportation to water access only properties. Once you hit the spell check, we'll be fine.
Mhm.
All right. So now my question, before we consider separating anything out, are there any counselors who will have difficulty, how should I put it? Will their vote change if these were separated into 2 or 3 different things, or are they going to vote all for all or against all type of thing? Because I don't want to go making separate resolutions if we don't have to.
I can't vote for the first and that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, you were asking us if we're looking to separate this. The original resolution I was fine with passing. The current resolution that has kind of been thrown together here, I think we need some background. We need some research on this before we go soliciting the province with this letter. This was not the intent of the original resolution. I don't know if the motioner and the person that seconded it are willing to add all these extras in here, but I think without due diligence and speaking to the marina openers, the marina operators, speaking to the people that are directly involved with these additions to here, this seems to be the want of certain councillors, but perhaps it's not even the want of the marinas. I think we're putting the cart in the front of the horse here. We have direction from the province on what we're supposed to do. The original resolution to me addressed a certain point that we were, wanting clarity on, but the rest of it is an ask that not necessarily all councillors want to ask.
Well, I would suggest, if I may, that if you're referring to the third and that recognized marinas may prepare for boating season, I think that A, it's only going in a letter, and B, it would be up to each marina to decide what they do or don't do. We're not telling them to do anything.
No,
And
but I'm just worried that the province has been very clear, and we're trying to change what the province has directed, which puts the marine operators perhaps in a position of a huge fine if they move ahead with this. This Ontario law wasn't written for the township of Georgian Bay.
No, but Councillor Bocek, this is a letter I am writing. This is not rules that we're making for the township. It's a letter I would be writing on behalf of the council and township, asking for some changes to provincial orders. Until those changes happen, the marinas are under the current set of rules. And we're just making suggestions that they open those rules up a little bit. Based on the 2 marinas that I talked about this yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I lose track these days. They are scared, and that may be a strong term, but they're very worried about the fact that they can't do anything to prepare for boat launching season. They're going to have a whole bunch of customers in front of them a day or 2 before the long weekend saying, I want my boat in the water. This is presuming, the optimist in us is presuming that we're actually going to be allowed to boat come the long weekend, and they won't be able to get them all in the water. I mean, they can do all the preparing they want to by taking off the shrink wrap and putting batteries in boats, but when they only have a few trailers, there's going to be a lot of back and forth, and they can't get that all done in the time people may want their boats. So
right. Your question to council was, did you want this to fly as it is, or did you want separate resolutions for the last 2 and that, or possibly even the last 3 and that? And I was simply responding to that the original resolution that was put on the table, I think myself, I would have a vote in one direction, but possibly on the other ones, I would have a vote in a different direction. So I would be in favor of separating the resolutions out so that specific points can be put through. Okay. And if the ones of council it's not to, then no.
Council, CAO Gunby. Can't hear a word.
with the resolution on the screen, I can't see anything. So hopefully you can see and hear me now. To remind everyone again that this is just a letter, and no matter how any of you vote on either of these resolutions, I'm sure that they will pass, even if they are divided or not, but the same letter will be going out. So you can separate these into 3 different resolutions and it will still be combined into one letter. So I think we're going into the weeds here again on this, because it is a letter recommending that they review the stipulations that they've put in.
Peter?
Yes.
Just quickly, I think I completely agree with our CAO. We're overthinking this. We're trying to get a letter out to get the province to understand who and what we are, and that there's been, in one way, there's been a misinterpretation of what a vessel is, a transportation vessel versus a pleasure craft, for example. And most people that aren't understanding of how we operate consider that we're in pleasure craft, when in fact they're a vessel for transportation. And I think that's part of the message we're trying to get across, is that who we are and what we are, and hopefully we can get out of this situation so our marinas can be operating in the future.
Okay.
Mayor, can I just blurt out one thing? The first "and that" clause, I think, needs to be separated from the other 3. The first "and that" clause says we're going to recommend to the province that they punish our residents for taking certain actions. The other 3 "and that" clauses are supporting and trying to lobby to the province how our residents may be different. And I think those 2 key characteristics need to be understood, and therefore this resolution needs to be separated into at least 2, so that one resolution where we have a recorded vote will record whether we as councillors are recommending that we want to punish our residents, and the other 3 are whether we want to support and lobby on behalf of our residents. Thank you.
Okay, well, then I would suggest, why don't we do it in 2? And I'm going to go one step further at Council Cooper and suggest that the first 2 "and that's" be combined, because obviously if we're going to recommend that, or if we're going to vote on whether or not non-primary place of residence is deemed non-essential, it would be far better to do that if we define what a primary place of residence is. So I would argue that the first 2 "and that's" are one, so to speak, and the second 2 "and that's" are a second thing.
Right, Your Worship.
Yes.
Just to clarify, because there's been a lot of conversations here as I've been trying to draft this, and the only place I have to draft it is in view of everybody. Is it the fact that the fine is being levied that is the issue? Because it was my initial understanding that water access properties and road access properties of non-permanent residents or non-primary place of resident population to be treated equally, which was the intent of the first 2 "and that's," which ties into the marina. So I'm happy to separate them out, but is it the fact that the word "fine" be levied for breach of such order? Is that inclusive part? Should that be removed? Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me, Councillor Hazelton.
Absolutely. From the very beginning, what I have been saying and others have been saying is we should be treating all of our residents and hopefully having them treated the same. So the fact that we would be encouraging fines to be levied for breach of a recommendation is we're trying to, as councillors, then recommend that we are going to punish our community. I'm not sure that anybody wants to do that. I can guarantee you that's the last thing I ever want to be seen to do.
The fines have been removed from the first "and that." Are you comfortable with that now?
I'm okay with that. Yep.
Okay. Let's call the vote.
Well, sorry, sir. Hold on. Am I separating this into 2 still, right?
No, let's leave it all at 1 now.
No.
All is 1. Yes?
We're in harmony now. We're in harmony.
So, I'm not going to be able to see everybody's hands, but we're going to work on it here. Does anybody need me to read it? I think you can read it for yourself at this stage. All those in favor? please raise your hand. I got C1.
You're doing a recorded vote, aren't you?
You don't have to, but I can.
Yes.
Councillor Hazelton has asked for a recorded vote. That means I don't have to look for hands.
Sorry, 1 second. Let the record show that a recorded vote has been requested by Councillor Hazelton. Councillor Hazelton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Bocek, how do you vote? Councillor Bocek, your mic is off, so I can't hear your answer.
Yes.
Councillor Cooper, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Douglas, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Jarvis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Wayanko, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Kutsier, how do you vote?
Oh, it's irrelevant, isn't it? Yes.
Let the record show the motion carries.
Okay. I know somewhere here I have another motion or two.
Two more.
It disappeared on me. Here we go.
Before we disappear, do we have any other business? I could just mention something.
No, it's a special meeting.
I just wanted to, when we have another meeting, and I don't know when that's going to be, maybe the staff can work on a topic, this idea of short-term rentals in our township. Do we have the authority to control short-term rentals during this pandemic? And if so, should it be discussed? So when we have another meeting, that would be a topic, and it would require some research in order to have that topic. So I don't know if anybody else wants to chime in, but I think that's a topic that should be discussed.
Okay, leave it with us.
I thought I'd heard that there was an order against them, but I could be wrong.
Peter, I believe you're correct. There was definitely an order against it by the provincial government. All
But I
short-term.
don't know if that's province-wide.
Well, we'll follow.
It might only be with cities. I don't know if it's, yeah, anyway.
We'll
follow
do
it
it.
up.
I just want to make a quick note to everyone. There was a jet ski that just went past, not once, but twice. So people are definitely up here recreationing.
It's snowing out.
Snowing like, yeah, well, no, the snow is now stopped here, but it was snowing a few minutes ago.
Make a
It's
great
just like,
video for somebody, Brian.
honestly.
Well, at least we know it wasn't any counselor doing it.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
true.
no, you could put an artificial background on you, so you don't know.
No, our boats are all tied up in the marina shrink wrapped right now.
Yeah.
And I've heard everybody's voices without jet ski noises in the background, so I think it's a good sign. Anyway, the motion in front of me reads, be it resolved that council adopts bylaw 2020-039, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the April 14th, 2020 special council meeting. All those in favor? I see lots of hands. That is carried. Thank you. And resolve the council does now adjourn at 4 p.m. until Tuesday, May 12th, 2020 at 9 a.m. or at the call of the chair. All those in favor?
Mayor, could I just jump in here for 1 second and say, thank you, everybody. I think we got to a very good conclusion.
That was supposed to be my line. I see lots of thumbs up, and I will also say thank you very much to everybody. I think good discussion, and clearly we have some writing to do. Oh, did I call for the vote? I saw everybody voting.
Yeah.
All those in favor? All right, I see enough hands to say that's carried. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, counselors. Hope to see you up here real soon.